Hello, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. This is our meeting for Friday, May 7th, 2021. I'm Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force. This meeting comes on the heels just 3 days after Brookline's townwide election, and that included town meeting seats, school committee seats, new moderator, and also the select board. The select board race, actually, Miriam Ashkenazi, who ran on a justice and equity centered vision for Brookline, was the top vote getter and will now be joining us in the select board. Her first meeting will be next Tuesday, which is our first meeting since the election. And also returning to the select board is Bernard Green. And so that, I'm sure, undoubtedly will have impacts for our work. Other groups that are looking at issues that we've brought up include the Brookline Housing Authority. Michael Jacobs, who is the commissioner, the chair of the Brookline Housing Authority Commissioners, ran unopposed and is returning to his role. And also on the school committee, there were 3 folks running unopposed for the 3-year seats. And then two people running in a contested race for a 1-year seat. The winner there was Steve Ehrenberg. Notably, both of those candidates had supported the recommendations of the task force to reimagine policing around school resource officers, which is to remove officers from schools. So there's your election update. In a minute, I'll take any, I may have some more updates to share, but there'll be an opportunity for you all to share any announcements or updates that you have. We're going to approve some meeting minutes from Friday, April 23rd. We're going to have a discussion about, we said we would only meet today if we're going to be addressing a budget amendment. Well, we do have a budget amendment, so we'll have a discussion about that Brookline Forward budget amendment for town meeting. And then we'll open it up to new business. I know Almas has something, and if there's anything else that we need to address in new business, we can do that. The other thing that I'll mention, welcome everybody joining us. The other thing that I'll mention is that last night I was invited to be with a group in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts. They are a reimagining group in Lexington. It was a really great opportunity to share what we're doing, but importantly for me to learn from them and what it is that they're doing. We're in some cases similar communities, in other ways very different communities. But they're only about half an hour away, and it was striking to see the sort of similar approach that they're taking in really being willing to sort of think beyond the policing box as it relates to public safety, and I thought that was great. I will say that there were 2 things that stood out to me from last night that I wanted to share, and I'll share this with panelists and attendees in the link. One was that town of Lexington engaged with someone in Government Ortiz from the law practices Anderson and Krieger and others to sort of do and you'll see in that link that I sent link to the report and also the presentation on reviewing police department policies and practices and having this sort of outside perspective and review of policies and practices of policing, particularly someone with experience in this area, it's something that I think we should really think about. I don't know that was, we had our own sort of citizen reform committee taking a look at that, but really getting some expert analysis from the outside is maybe something we should consider moving forward. The other piece is, and I'm going to put this in the chat too. They invited this Center for Policing Equity in to talk also. They've also been working with communities, particularly around reimagining. The main speaker last night was one of their sort of chief researchers at the Center for Policing Equity. He's a PhD. He's also a 30-year veteran of the police force. And it was really interesting to hear his perspective on the need to really shift, police back to their core function. It's really remarkable to hear the same things that we've been talking about here elsewhere, including for someone who's been associated with police department for a long time, but shift policing back to their core function, which is addressing violent crime. As I've said from the select board many times before, when we do police promotions, I say, it's important to have people that protect us from our worst selves sometimes, protect domestic violence victims, protect people, victims of all kinds of violence, those kinds of things, and really having a body that focuses on that, but not on issues related to social services. So in any case, I share those two resources with you so you can see what another community is looking into, and A, how similar their approach is, but B, the kinds of resources they're engaging with that, quite frankly, I don't think have been engaged in reform efforts in Brookline, and that we might want to consider engaging with going forward. So I'll stop there. Those are my morning updates. Anything from you all, any updates or announcements or things you'd like to share before we get into the agenda? Okay. I will say also, congratulations.
I want to welcome Chi-Chi and Kimberly to town meeting.
All right.
We're happy to have you there. We're excited to have you there. And yeah, glad you won your races. Welcome.
Thank you, Anne.
Right. That's exactly what I was about to say. So there you go. Thanks, Anne.
Excited to join town meeting.
Well, Chi-Chi, you already.
You and the largest number of voters in the precinct decided that you should join town meeting.
Oh, okay.
Pop the ticket.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. Well, you've already you went straight into the fire joining advisory committee, so town meeting will be no sweat for you. And Kimberly, we're excited for you too. You're both going to be really important voices in town meeting, and I'm excited to hear from you there. Anne.
Just a quick note, congratulations to everyone, but also to recognize that the first week in May is Public Service Recognition Week. And public service is not just who writes your check that like pays your bills and turns your lights on, but the volunteer service hours that happen. And one thing I've learned in the 2 years that I've been here in Brookline is that if we were to calculate and pay out at a reasonable or living wage, the number of volunteer hours, well, we would have a much higher tax rate here in Brookline. And so I want to thank you for your 8 a.m. on Friday service in Public Service Recognition Week, and thank the other folks that your tax dollars actually do pay their light bills and help, keep their families going as well. So thank you for your service.
Oh, that's great, Anne. Thank you for that. Well done, everybody. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I say let's get into it. First up, we have the question of approving the meeting minutes from Friday, April 23rd, 2021. Any last minute edits or additions or questions about the minutes? Hearing none, let's go straight into approval. And I'm going to go across my screen. So all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from Friday, April 23rd, 2021. Anne?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chi-Chi?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Almas?
Yes.
Eitan?
Yes.
Malcolm?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
And I say yes too. There we go. All right, next, the meat of our discussion today. This is the Brookline Forward budget amendment. You will see that in our packet. Devin, is that something you can share a link to for the public, just so they know how to easily find it?
Yes.
Thank you so much. And so you'll see a link. It is titled Serve Department Head Budget Amendment. And I'm gonna step back and Bonnie, let you introduce this amendment, and I can sort of talk a little bit more. Well, let me tee it up for you, and then you can sort of introduce the amendment. So this builds off of our Brookline Forward proposal. What we've talked about all along is not being particularly dogmatic about the arrangement of Brookline forward, but that the conceptual idea here was a greater investment of our municipal dollars in the social service space. So we've been talking as a select board about this. I've been talking with Mel Kleckner about this, with Mike Sandman about this, and of course with folks like Bonnie and Ann about this, who've been working on this budget amendment, and really trying to figure out how we actually get that started. We don't think it makes sense to say, let's just establish a department out of whole cloth right now. We do think it makes sense to figure out exactly what we need, and then to build a department like that over time, potentially with requests in the next budget and even future budgets to be able to sort of really build that out. But we want to be able to start the work in earnest now. We could go the route of having a consultant, and we may still want to do that, is have a consultant to work with us to conduct the needs assessment to figure out exactly what's needed in the community. But we also believe that it's important to start by hiring the person who's going to lead this effort and offer them an opportunity to engage with our community and to even lead the effort of figuring out what it is that we need as a community. This is a model that recently has been. I mean, I know it well from the academic space. I mean, our folks like Ibram Kendi came over and then built out the Center for Anti-Racist Research at BU, and the same thing happened with our First Generation Center, and I've seen it elsewhere. But also even in Somerville, they recently hired a director for racial and social equity, and that person's job is exactly what we've been contemplating, which is to hit the ground running, to engage with the community, to figure out what the needs are, and then to present a budget and staffing plan to work to meet those needs. And that's exactly what it is that we're proposing be done in this budget. And so I'll turn it over to Bonnie and Ann to talk a little bit more about it. And then Mel, love to get your perspective on this, and Mike too, you too.
I'm so glad you teed that up, because my brain is not ready for all of that context. So here it is. It's we worked with Melissa Goff to figure out the amount to be able to pay this position, this person. And so we, in this strategy, we are not, this is not going to be a budget amendment coming from the police department. This is going to be coming from off the top of the reserve fund, which is money that would be in the 2022 budget. But if we remove it from the top of that allocation now, before the fiscal year starts of 2022, we don't have to go through all of the, we don't have to have the advisory committee approve this as emergency funding, which it is not. So, so we're doing that. This way it doesn't become an argument over policing as such. Because it's not really. This is an argument about, or this is a move to improve Brookline by making these services available to everybody, obviously. So I think I'm really excited about this and the strategy that Raul has helped come up with. And I think we have a really great chance of getting this passed. So I'm not 100% about the process going forward, or how much detail you want me to get into with that, Raul.
Let's have Mike weigh in, and then we'll bring Mel in too to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so the process is pretty straightforward. The advisory committee will have a hearing and then vote on the budget amendment, I think on Tuesday. We had a meeting last night, as Chichi and I sort of must feel this morning. Chichi must feel like we've been on a meeting continuously, because we finished at about 11:15 last night. And one of the things we ended with was I let the members of the advisory committee know that this was coming. I said there would be approximately $100,000, and so $105,000, that's close enough for government work, as I used to say in the artillery. That there was little bit of discussion, but basically I think this will go through advisory and come out with a favorable vote and a recommendation to town meeting to, well, actually the budget itself will get changed when it gets presented to town meeting. The budget will already have this in it because the budget is technically town meetings, sorry, the advisory committee's article. So I apologize for all of the sausage making talk, but that's the process that happens. And I think this will go forward quite easily.
Thanks, Mike. And this is really important. That the sausage making piece of it is actually we need to understand that. So thanks for sharing that. Mel, your thoughts?
Sure, thanks. Mike mentioned the process about a budget amendment, but it may not be necessary to do a budget amendment. You know, I am actively considering making a proposal to change the budget, not amend it. You know, it's actually a motion that the advisory committee will make, and I might recommend to the advisory committee to modify the budget that's being proposed to town meeting to incorporate this funding. And I think I'm pretty close. You know, as you get really closer to the finish line, there's, you know, you're able to sometimes you know, make final adjustments and be able to fund this. And this is something that you know, I think is very, very important to the town. I really liked it when the select board sort of adopted a vote that I took was an endorsement of the need for the town to get a better handle on its social services. They've already approved specifically a CAHOOTS arrangement where we will look at more of the emergency response nature of our social network, but also, you know, I think this Brookline Forward proposal was, you know, a commitment to really look to see, you know, what kind of services the town needs. And this is all around, you know, it's as I think Malcolm's study showed that, you know, recreation and youth service is very important too, not just all the things that, you know, are more commonly referred to as social services. So I'm very interested in pursuing it. I have said all along that I didn't consider the Reimagining task forces or the reform committee's proposals as real proposals that would just, you know, change the organization and move forward. I think we need a lot more study. Whenever you want to change an organization this fundamentally, I believe you need a much more analysis. So in addition to CAHOOTS, I can assure you I'm going to be hiring another consultant. Or maybe it's CAHOOTS, you know, I don't know fully their capacity, but, you know, wanted to look at the broader picture, how we would, you know, what are our resources now? What are our needs? Where are the resources currently allocated? And does it make sense to create this cabinet level position? So these are all questions that I don't believe have been settled, despite, I think, good faith efforts by both of the committees to create an organizational model. So I really do want to do some study, and quite honestly, that's good because, you know, the money that we're talking about to really fill out a department, you know, we also got to figure out where that money's coming from. That's not in the budget today. So that's another aspect of this study. So I'm ready to find the money. Raul and I have talked a lot about this concept of bringing on sort of the person before the study is finished. And I've been intrigued by that concept. Showed me the Somerville position that's being created in a different area. But and so I am interested in this hybrid approach of looking possibly at, you know, both consulting as well as a resource who's here, a senior person, I think, somebody who has experience in this area and could help us understand our needs along with a consultant, and also really help coordinate the work out there. So as you all know, there's social workers and social service capacity in many different departments, school department, the recreation department, the health department, the diversity and inclusion commission, community relations department. And so I see that this person, a senior person could create this opportunity to help, coordinate these resources and actually make them stronger, even before we add positions into the mix. So that's what I'm thinking about. I will tell you that we had a meeting yesterday at the Town School Partnership Committee. I'm not sure actually that the select board has really thought this through and their vote. And I was a little surprised that this concept might be, the funding is not an issue necessarily, but actually how we do it could be a matter of some dispute. So I'm still working through that, but I want you to know that. I don't know if you've ever heard that, Raul, that I was a little concerned that, that maybe there's a little bit more opposition or an interest in going a different way. And so that's going to have to be resolved, and that will have to be resolved at the select board level, because that's the body that does that. So the question is, and I'll ask Mike too, to what point is, are we going to have these discussions? Because, the money is not the issue, but I think, some of the wording could be, and I'll have to work that through. I mean, that's part of the process that I do. But I frankly, was a little surprised, and I think my hybrid approach might not be necessarily universally supported.
You talking about on the select board?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, because.
Or the reform committee making recommendations to the select board.
Okay, right.
Mel, I want to thank you for all that work. It's so great, and your support. I also want to clarify. So there's two avenues of possibility here. Either, Mel can do his thing and find that money and put it in the budget, and then it would be, and please correct me if I'm wrong, then it would be up to the select board to pass it. And then it doesn't need to be a budget amendment that goes through town meeting. And if that fails, then we have this budget amendment that we would move through town meeting. So we're prepared for both options here.
So I will tell you that I'm not going to be calling it Brookline Forward, because it has, this political baggage that I frankly, I have a lot of patience for, but it exists. So, I'll probably try to you have to understand that that's something that's going on here, that there could be two dual proposals around this. I was thinking that the vote of the select board was both sides, frankly. I think Roel and Bernard had indicated that, our proposal isn't just exactly what we put on the paper. So I was taking that to mean that there was a little bit, maybe more willingness to just reach something in the middle. I'm not sure that is the case on the reform committee side.
Anne.
I just want to thank both Mike and Mel for doing this work for us and being supportive of our recommendations, and helping us figure out the logistical moving forward pieces and how to potentially make this happen. So thank you.
Agreed. Almas.
Mel, you had just referred to something during your conversation about hiring a consultant. You talked about cahoots, but then you said, or maybe somebody else, or can you just talk a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Sure. Well, I don't want to leave the impression that we're not hiring cahoots. We are hiring cahoots. We are hiring cahoots, at least for the scope of work that relates to, how they interact with the first response and emergency response. I was just saying, and I need another consultant to help me understand the organizational structure and the needs of the town overall for social services, daily social services. It could be cahoots, or it could be two consultants. I don't know, but cahoots will certainly be the consultant that's going to be dealing with that scope of work that you've identified.
Thank you.
So this is a good time for, I see Malcolm, other questions and comments, and ultimately what I'd like to do is to move us toward a vote, understanding that I think the clear preference is to sort of bake this into the budget and not, frankly, not use town meetings time and engage in you know, who knows, what could be a completely pleasant discussion at town meeting, or perhaps a not so pleasant discussion at town meeting over this budget amendment. And the alternative is, you know, what we just said, is to produce the budget amendment. And what we're going to be looking for is support from the task force to indicate its full support for this budget amendment. So that's what we're hoping to work toward. But I want to hear lots of comments and questions from you all. Malcolm.
Thanks. I think one of the things I've learned in this process and some of the researching is like, as much as I'm really in favor of this and like wanting to get the ball rolling instead of waiting, we have to have something that gets attached. And I don't necessarily think it's this task force that does it, you know, whether it's a timeline or some like public, you know, what I found in this process that happens in a lot of our institutions is we create these things and they're really well intentioned, but then nobody knows what's actually going on, what happens and what goes from there. And so I don't know if it's, I don't know what exactly that is, right? So if in enough time for next year for budget, if they need to ask staff, like, you know, just something to say, like what this is actually creating. Because I understand what you're saying. Like, there needs to be some form of assessment where it does cross over. I mean, my heart is really big towards children. So where it does cross over, perhaps with schools and rec and the teen center and other things. But I also heard those arguments come from like the senior center, veterans and other things. You know, public health, diversity, like, and so I think one of the things in this process that, you know, you shouldn't have to be an insider to figure all that out. And so how do we present this in a way where every Brookline citizen can know they can access this? And frankly, every Brookline employee can know, because there's so many times, I mean, you know, most of my colleagues don't work or don't live in Brookline, but they need to help get services for a kid who lives in Brookline or for, you know, someone else. And so I think like, I hope we have that in mind as we develop this. And again, I don't know if it's necessarily our job to do that, but like, how do we make this front and center so everybody knows this resource is available? And that's just, I think we have to start with that. As much as the money, like what is the vision where every person knows they can access this?
Great, thanks, Malcolm. Mel, and maybe Anne, actually, if you can talk about just, and by the way, estimates, of course, and because I know there are these concerns, you know, things happen at town meeting and then what happens after that. But of course, some things do take time. You know, about how long it takes to engage a consultant to start this work. Obviously, we have to figure out the scope of the work, which is going to take time, and folks are going to have to come together and figure out exactly what we want the consultant to do. And you get the best results when you're very clear about what it is that you're looking for. And it's going to take time to do that, and then hire the right consultant, bring them on, have them do the work. And then of course, on the hiring side of creating this position, similarly, we've got to figure out exactly what we want the job description to look like. Then we have to go out and search for the best people. Maybe there's a public process, a hiring committee, those kinds of things. Can you just talk a little bit about timeline and about how long these things take? Not trying to rush, just trying to understand how long it takes to do these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I can tell you about I'll talk about both processes. The RFP process, you know, once you get the RFP to hit the road or hit the news, you know, the notices, it takes, you know, really you give 3 or 4 weeks for people to make proposals, and then you take a couple weeks to, you know, evaluate them. So, you know, that's a 6 to 8 week process. You know, it's developing the scope of work, it's getting going, it's getting the people involved. And then, you know, you've got literally dozens and dozens of these initiatives going on at the same time in different places. And they all are impacting Anne's office or the procurement office. So you just can't do them all at once. So, you know, there's built-in delay, there's no question, but I think the hardest part is to get it going, is to get the group together. That's going to be the advisory group to help develop the scope of work, which is as you say, role and some of the requirements is the meat of you got to do that up front to get the kind of results you're looking for. So that's the hardest part, I think. In terms of hiring, yeah, it's ideally it takes about probably 2 months to total to get a person, from the time it takes to put something out. This one I think is going to take longer just because it's a unique position, and it's going to take a little more time.
That's helpful. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions?
Are we done?
Can we get a sense from folks that we haven't heard from? Do you feel supportive of this approach? Are there any concerns you have? Love to be able to address those now if there are.
I mean, I don't have any concerns about the approach. I wanted to thank Bonnie and Mel and Raul for all your work on this. Being used to dealing with government at all levels in organizations, things do take time. I mean, sometimes it takes my organization months just to hire someone. So the idea that it's going to take some time is to be expected.
Thanks, Chi-Chi. Eitan, how you feeling? Oh, wait, hold that thought. I'm calling you, and I just saw Kristen raise his hand. We'll take Kristen first.
Yeah, so this isn't specifically my domain of expertise. I will share kind of what's on my mind in thinking this through with you. My concern is that we have to be mindful of not evaluating the needs as they exist right now, using an approach where we're trying to actually shift what kind of needs we ask people to surface. We don't know what it looks like to ask people to think differently about coordinated social services, not calling the police, things being integrated in ways that the town has not yet done. So the premise or the idea that we could understand that by looking only at what we're currently doing troubles me a little bit. I do want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that this would be new ways of working, hard to predict what the demand would be, but I would expect that the demand would look unprecedented for us if we're doing it right. So I just want to make sure that we find ways to, as we're thinking about this, not limit ourselves to only understanding it by what we see right now, I guess is the concern that I have.
Someone who says this is not their area, that was actually really insightful. I thought I think that's really important. So, we've been sort of calling it a needs assessment, but implicit in that is almost like, what do we need right now? What are the unmet needs right now? And I think what you're bringing to light is thinking about what we need to move forward, what we need our future to be, which is also a visioning exercise, as well as just a simple, where are we right now and where the gaps are. I think that's really important, and that should be worked into the scope there. Thank you. Bonnie?
Watch me unmute. Yeah, so I have a question about that, because there's so many questions and worries I have about this process going forward, and how much is actually able to be built into this at this point. Like we're not writing a job description here. We are just hoping to be able to fund this position. So I'm trying to fold what you just said, Kristen, into the process of what this is going forward. Like, it's delicate in this moment, getting it through all the decision makers, but also super important to paint a picture of this as an avenue to, like you said, a new a new way forward. So where does that, I don't want to call it an education process, more like a inspiration process where people can, like what we were talking about before when we were, back in the day, old school task force work. We were talking about how to get people thinking about, what this means for the future of public safety or those things. Like where did those ideas fit into this process? I think it's virtually the same question Kristen's asking.
Mel?
Yeah, well, I think any look at your needs, to me, has to anticipate future needs or future ways in which they are going to change in the future. That would not be a good use of our money if we didn't try to look forward. But it's easier said than done. Especially in this arena where we're really reimagining things. I think that's where I like the cahoots contract that we're going to have going, and maybe even before this one is fully vetted. So I assume that cahoots study is going to identify some of these different approaches and models. But whether it's the consulting contract or hiring this individual, I think we want to make sure that they understand that we want their vision too, that we need their ability to try to understand. And then there's also community engagement processes that either we build into the consulting contract and say you shall hold, what 1, 2, however many public forums, or the employee that we have, the resource, could just decide to do that as well, or the select board could sponsor it, or you name it. So there's a number of ways you can build that in as well. Those are my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Mel. Anne?
I think what Kristen brought up is absolutely integral to all of this, that it's not so much what's missing right now, but what we can do different and how we can serve the needs of people in this community in a richer, more supportive way. And that with just a general step of moving forward with this work, that vision has to be part of what we're thinking about every step of the way. Cahoots is one example of an organization that's doing this work within crisis intervention. There are numerous examples out there of how social services can be implemented in a more community-based welcoming, safety, there are other examples of this, as Raul was talking about, looking at Somerville, looking at Lexington for other aspects of what our task force is working on. There are other communities that we can reach out to talk with, to get ideas from about what would work for Brookline. So I think, thank you, Kristen, for bringing it up. I think it's incredibly important to always have that vision of how it can be done differently in the future. Very much based in every step of the process. And obviously community input in Brookline is huge. Hearing from residents about what they would like to see, as well as what they feel is missing, but what would they like to see that would be more helpful for them. So.
Thanks, Anne. Others? Lloyd?
I just want to reinforce what Ann said, with one other addition. I think we really need to know with the people on the ground actually having the direct contact with individuals is really important. I find that any consultant that we do hire needs to be aware of that. They're the ones who knows where the gaps are. That's all I want to add.
Appreciate that, Lloyd. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Anyone else? All right. So just a reminder of where we are. We're going to take a vote on this budget amendment. Again, this is our plan B. Frankly, the plan A would be to have a favorable response from the select board on Tuesday that moves this, working with the advisory committee into the budget, into the sort of main budget here without the need to file a budget amendment. I think apps, and also of course, Mel doing his thing under the couch cushions and knowing where all the money's coming from, those kinds of things. The alternative here is this budget amendment, which I do think is well crafted. I think that it is modest, frankly, and I think it is thoughtful. It doesn't propose that we do during this budget a wholesale shift from the police department over to social services. In fact, this budget amendment doesn't even touch the police department, and really avoids this being a referendum on what people think about policing or not. When the actual purpose of this budget is to focus on really building upon social services, which we think, investing in addressing the root causes of inequities rather than spending money addressing the symptoms is just a much better way to use our precious municipal tax dollars. And so this moves us in that direction, but in a really thoughtful, I don't want to say cautious, but I would say practical way, in a way that gets us the information we need to truly figure out, as Mel said, what exactly do we need to build into our government, and position wise and resource wise, and how is that going to have the most impact to benefit the people who need it most in our community. So that's what we're putting forward. It definitely, I think the hiring of someone, in addition to the consultancy, which we all agree is important, but having that person, really does say we are moving in this direction. It's an affirmative move into this direction. It builds it into our budget regularly, and more importantly, I think brings in a thought leader in this space that's going to be, at least for the time being, working directly, out of the select board's office under Mel, and has the resources and the support of the select board's office, and hopefully the entire government. But in any case, that's where we are. And so unless there's any other questions or discussion, I'd like to move us to a vote, and move in favor of supporting this budget amendment, which we're on our agenda. I'll continue to refer to it as the Brookline Forward Budget Amendment. But I take Mel's point that perhaps in other circles it may end up being called something else, and that's fine. I think that's fine. If it makes other people feel better about supporting something really important, really cleverly and thoughtfully designed, and that's going to have a great amount of positive impact in our community, and they want to call it something else, I'm fine with that. All right, so seeing no other questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and move us moving favorable action on supporting this amendment, and I'll move across my screen. Malcolm, you're the first person I see.
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Chi-Chi?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Almas?
Yes.
Eitan? Kimberly?
Yes.
And you get a yes from me too. So that's unanimous support from the task force. Thank you all for that, and for your comments and concerns and questions about it too. I think once one of these versions you know, on the other side of town meeting, one of these versions is worked into the budget, and we move forward to developing this consultancy and building out this position. I think it's going to be really important for some members, at least, of this group to be involved in that work. And I know others are going to want to be involved in that work too, from the Reform Committee and from maybe even other spaces. But to really think about the scope of work on consultancy and the scope of duties on the position. Again, the more attention and care we put in at that level, the better off the results we're going to get once we have the person or people in place to do that work. So we'll do that. All right, so I'm going to move us on to new business. I know that Almas has something for us for new business, and then we may likely have time for any other new business. Almas, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So I had wanted to bring up something that happened April 27th at the select board meeting. There was a public comment from Ronald Wilkinson, and the reason, and this is in your package and I'll also put it in the chat. But basically, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because it addresses both the Reform Committee as well as the Reimagining Task Force. And so I thought it would be really, if people weren't there at that select board meeting, just wanted to talk through it a little bit and think about it. So I think, I mean, I can either share my screen or I just wanted to focus on 2 points. If you all have it in front of you, or I can share the screen, whichever is easier. I'll just read like what I think is relevant kind of points, which was, so this was by Ronald Wilkinson, and it, you know, the first part of it is about a bit about white supremacy. I'm not going to talk about that. It was just background. And then it says proposals have come from 2 groups mandated by the Brookline Select Board to investigate this issue. So these are our group and the Police Reform Committee. And what it says is here is, I believe that focusing solely on police misconduct has inadvertently led all of the proposals presented thus far to have a serious major flaw. They dangerously ignore the power of non-legal expressions of white supremacy to deliver unchecked oppression on our marginalized communities. And if we limit ourselves solely to addressing police-based right abuses, you know, it says, I believe that white supremacy will just pour more energy into its non-legal expressions, such as more frequent, more serious, and more blatant hate crimes. I think the crux of it is that it says, to effectively fight hate crimes, I believe we need anti-racist law enforcement that is grounded in a deep commitment to serve and protect everyone in our communities, especially those who have been marginalized. Creating and sustaining that kind of law enforcement, it requires recruiting personnel who genuinely believe in the mission, providing infrastructure and standards that enable to actually fulfill the mission, close accountable relationships, both directly with community and with partner public services. And so to successfully serve and protect the community, law enforcement has to be both genuinely trustworthy and genuinely trusted by the community. So again, like when I'm reading this, it feels like, so we've done a lot of things, and both the groups have done this. And I think the point that had been brought up is like, have we really addressed this anti-racist law enforcement to the extent that we should have, or have we just focused basically on like, you know, what to do about police and police misconduct? So I just had wanted to open that up. I know when I had put my application forwards for these groups, I remember even saying something like that, but somehow it, you know, we probably talked about it to some extent, but this feels kind of like deeper, like we want to have these police personnel that really believe in anti-racist law enforcement. And how do we do that as a group, and who does it? And, you know, so kind of just wanted to bring that up for discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I'll say that, you know, especially I mentioned that conversation that we had in Lexington last night, and I really was left with the impression that we haven't done enough to in the first part, which is to interrogate our current model of policing. And I think that this group did a very good job of meeting the charge to explore alternatives to policing, certainly. And I think the expectation was that that the Reform Committee was going to do a significantly deeper dive into policing as it is, and to make it safer, more accountable, and more transparent, and to, you know, there's part of me that I think understands. I think I understand part of this memo, but maybe not all of it. But in so much as the memo is encouraging us to root out white supremacy from policing itself, I don't know that that's been addressed at all. Word one. And maybe that's a conversation that needs to be had as part of this. Chi-Chi.
So I have a lot of thoughts about the statement, given that when you're talking about hate crimes, a lot of it's been directed at the Asian American community. First of all, thank you for raising this, Almas, and thanks to Ron for putting the statement together. I definitely agree. The thread through everything is white supremacy, whether it's police misconduct against Black Americans or hate crimes against Asian Americans. One thing I've been very concerned about is law enforcement responses around hate crimes, because certainly the most egregious examples of what's going on are criminal acts and should be prosecuted and such, like stabbings or assaults. But a lot of what's going on is racism that doesn't rise to the level of a crime or microaggressions. And, for example, there's a hate crime bill in the Massachusetts legislature right now that would criminalize things that are right now not criminalized. And, my fear is that will end up hurting Black and brown folks because we know that's where disproportionate enforcement goes. So what we've been advocating is education, and specifically, K to 12 education, but just more education and information out there about the history of Asian Americans and anti-Asian racism. And so, one thought is just, for me, a lot of this should not revolve around law enforcement responses, especially this hate crimes bill, which I'm troubled by. Another thought is, I think certainly rooting out white supremacy in the police department, all police departments, is very important. Some of that is hiring, but some of that is leadership, because, there are folks, that the police department is currently staffed. And I just keep going back to what happened to Prentice Pilot and SD Zaraima's gun, and, what happened to Gerald Alston. Strong leadership is also needed to root out white supremacy and to send the message it will not be tolerated. The message, has to come from up top. And it has to be eliminated. I mean, the saying, there's a lot of defense for police departments saying it's just a few bad apples. Well, the complete expression is a few bad apples ruins the bunch or ruins the barrel. And so I agree, the need to root out white supremacy. I also agree with Raul's point, our mission, our charge was the reimagining the functions that could be moved away from policing. But I just feel like there's a combination. Sorry, now I'm showing the effects of being up at 11:15 and waking up at 7. All right, I'll let someone else go.
No, thank you, Chi-Chi. Appreciate that. Kristen.
Wanted to say thank you, Almas, for bringing this up. I do think that there is some connective thread between the conversation we were just having and then what you've introduced, Almas, in that if we believe that we want to try to rethink how social services and support of social services can play a role in a future Brookline, then the scope of what we're considering has to be anti-racism in more than just law enforcement and policing. It has to be part of the way that social services are delivered, because we're actually specifically and consciously asking for a shift away for law enforcement being the way that people put solutions on the table for getting their problem solved. And the other part of how this resonates for me is there's a very vibrant and heated conversation happening right now based on a piece that was put out by the Fordham Institute about whether or not you can be anti-racist or not and teach Black and brown children. And the level of vitriol and animosity that asking that question has brought up, I think, is particularly telling for us if we're going to say that we have expectations around the degree to which anti-racism informs you doing any sort of service for the public good. Then I think that goes straight at what you're talking about, Almas. And in many respects, I'm really surprised and disappointed by the way that that conversation is unfolding in the education space. And I suspect it's going to be even more difficult to try to get that conversation elevated across other spaces for people who work for the public sector and public good as well.
Thanks, Kristen. Bonnie?
Yeah, almost. Thank you for bringing that up. I think I just want to draw some distinctions between the phrase routing out white supremacy in like the police department versus anti-racism. So we're never going to route out white supremacy from the police department because white supremacy exists outside of the police department, and the police department is made up of us, of people, of society. So it's impossible to create a perfect non-white supremacist bubble in our circumstance, which is why we're doing the work we're doing, right? And so anti-racist is definitely essential. And I think we have been asking that. This process has been one big anti-racist question to the police department, where we're saying, this is what we see. Can you see it too? And can we work together in this effort to be anti-racist? And thus far, the answer has been no. But absolutely 100%, we need anti-racist cops, you know, because if there's going to be cops, you need them to be anti-racist because it's, you know, and when we say anti-racist means actively battling white supremacy at every step of the way in the institution, if it as applied to the police department in every level of that institution. So yes, 100% we need anti-racist police officers. Bring it on, 100%. You know, if there's anything I can do to help move that forward, let's do it. But again, I want to say that we have been asking those questions, and we have been trying to move that forward. And I do hope that the Reform Committee takes that very seriously to do that work, because that's their charge, right? To do that. So maybe we can, in the building of this department and the thinking process forward, we can work together with some of those people since they are doing that reform level work, to be like, look, this is the perspective that we all together need to move forward with in order to build a brighter, better Brookline.
I'll just say, as for the Reform Committee, I mean, their work is wrapped or all but wrapped up at this point. Really, it's the body that's going to be taking this work on into the future is going to be the Police Commissioner. The Police Commissioner's Advisory Committee, the PCAC group that the Select Board approved a couple weeks back, and so it's going to be really important, to make sure that their voices represented that are concerned about these issues. But I think also thinking as we think about how to move social services forward, how to move this profession in so much as it's needed in our community, again, to protect us from our worst selves in certain cases, how to move this profession forward. And I think there's someone that can help us with that. It is an officer that responded to the survey that the police committee, the Police Reforms Committee put out, and they asked rank and file officers their perspectives. And an officer that's been on our force for 11 to 20 years. I think there's been a lot made of that survey about morale and who's to blame for low morale in the police department. Is it the select board or certain select board members and leadership in the town? Is it the leadership of the department? And that's called out significantly in here as well. But this here is really notable. And I'm going to read this to you all. This is an officer, says they've been on the force for 11 to 20 years. And says, if you break down our calls for service, you can see the amount of calls we respond to or reports we generate that aren't really police related. The department is top heavy for sure. We have a lot of officers hiding in positions that aren't really police related and could be staffed by appropriately trained and educated civilians. Maybe consider that if we stop responding to calls we didn't need to, our call volume and reports would substantially decrease. We could have less police officers on the street, less, but better trained and raised standards and better pay. Then the town could have mental health services or social services or public safety officers handling a lot of the duties that police officers handle right now. There aren't many situations where you need a uniformed armed officer. And in the situations that you do, you want someone who is capable of actually apprehending a criminal or protecting a citizen. Today, technology can do a lot of the work as well. We're in a unique position where we can make some significant changes and create programs that help our residents. We can't get rid of police. We are a necessary institution to our society because there are people out there who will hurt others. However, police officers should stay within their lane. I responded to many calls where the callers need a teacher, counselor, lawyer, parent, nurse, psychologist, etc., but not a cop. There are also men and women who take this job, then realize the actual job is not for them and excel in a specialty job. They have the motivation and desire to help, but may not be professionally qualified. The town could have some type of education incentive or professional development program to get them into a civilian position where they would be doing the same thing they are doing now as a cop, but in a more appropriate environment. The crisis intervention team, for example, is a great program, but with cops, it won't reach its full potential. Our tactical team is pretty much entirely grant funded, but having a few officers participate in a regional team instead will give them actual experience in the field. We don't need a SWAT team in Brookline, but we do need SWAT capability, which is fulfilled by Boston State or regional team if we were to join. Instead, that funding could be used to enhance the capabilities of the patrol division so that each officer has the equipment and confidence to respond to a critical situation. A lot of officers just focus on details because that's where the money is, and their actual job comes second. If the pay was raised, they would still work details, but if the standards were raised, then the cops who actually care about the job would still be here, and with support, they would actually work. The ones that don't could be doing something else. We can't continue to just fill slots with bodies because we need to fill traffic posts, write parking tickets, or respond to unnecessary calls to raise the call count to justify the budget and manpower. I have my personal opinions and they may be similar to others, but my motivations are not the same. I know some people who wouldn't meet the standard that want to cut calls so they can do less work. I want to cut response to be able to focus on police work and engaging with the community. Communication and respect are key. Frankly, if we would have put out that survey, someone would have probably accused us of writing that answer. This piece here, which by the way, it's on page 97 of the report on that survey, and I'll pop it. I have that thing where I can't paste into the chat for some reason. Well, it's on page 97 of that report. Really gets at the heart of what we've been talking about along, and frankly, have been criticized for saying, have been excoriated for saying, have been saying that we're anti-police for saying. And here we have a veteran officer in our own police department who's saying exactly the same things that we've been saying all along about really the need to return police to their core function, to if we have these social service needs, to have people that are appropriate to respond to those social service needs. It's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. So I whoever that officer is, I salute you, and I'm ready to work with you to build out the kind of department that meets the needs that you identify and that we've identified as well. I'll say this too, as the board still has some decisions to make, and so does the school committee and the housing authority, by the way, about the reports that have come out of these two bodies. But at some point, we need to hire a new police chief. And to Ron's memo and to Almas's points, I've got lots of questions about what a police department in a progressive community like Brookline should look like in the future. And what does an anti-racist police department look like? I'd love to hear their perspective. And I don't want to hear about de-escalation training. We have that. I don't want to hear about, having a social worker in the police department. We have that. Those are not the solutions that we're looking for. We're looking for a radically different department that is going to really change its orientation. And in some ways, that will mean limiting the scope and scale of policing. And I look forward to a chief that is open and willing to have that conversation, with the understanding that, and I've said this all along, including when I met with the chief of the president of the police union, I do think that that officers should be better paid and also have access to whatever professional development and training they need. I want the best trained, most motivated officers to do the work in the way that this community wants them to do the work, not in the way that it's done in so many communities. But that may mean limiting the scope and scale of police duties. And that's the trade-off that there is to be had here. So in any case, I wanted to share that with you all, but to know, I presume and I hope that that's not the only officer in our department that feels that way. And that is at least a nugget that we can work to build off of together. Thanks, tip of the hat to the person that directed me to that particular comment. And there you go. And let's talk some more. Anne.
Absolutely. That particular person's statement was so important and helpful to read, and we want folks like that person to be engaged in what we're trying to do, and to give us ideas and to help us build the type of department that we're hoping to build. I just wanted to say, I noticed in reading through the report, there were other officers who said some similar things, just not, oh, here come my dogs. Who said similar things, just not as long of a paragraph, sorry. So I saw that in other respects in the report too, other officers saying we shouldn't be doing the mental health part, we should be, just lines here and there. So I think that there are officers who sound interested in really working on with us on making a police department in Brookline look like what we're hoping to build. And those folks should absolutely be involved in this work and hopefully reach out to us. And sorry about the dogs.
So I thought you were being attacked at first, but it's just how they play.
She's
Great.
Very happy.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Anne. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on to other business?
Just like to second the point about leadership and the select board's role in making sure the leadership reflects the town's priorities. I would say I started, at the beginning of our work here, I did not have any kind of oppositional identity against the police department. I thought there could be a constructive conversation about a mutual goal of making sure that the police practices reflected the priorities of the community, making sure that we route out racial bias and all that. And I think there was a lot of deterioration, mostly because of a lack of leadership. And I think that reading through the police survey, that really comes through. Rank and file don't trust the leadership. They think people are promoted for the wrong reasons. of course, there were a lot of complaints about our own work, but there were also a ton of complaints about the culture of the department that has nothing to do with this committee. Some of it has to do with pay, but it has to do with leadership. And I've just gotten more and more dismayed about how this has all gone down and become conflictual instead of cooperative. And I think that, especially reading the survey of the police officers, the number one thing is, the department needs a leadership that can both reflect the community's priorities as articulated by the select board and speak to the officers' needs. But, wow, that survey really showcases that our work completely aside, there's a leadership problem. And in the end, that comes back to the select board. I mean, I said it last week, I'll say it again, the select board is responsible for this and needs to take that responsibility seriously in a way that I don't think it seems like hasn't happened in the past.
Thanks, Eitan. Mike?
Yeah, so first of all, that comment is certainly not a surprise that one or perhaps many officers feel that way and are able to, and that particular officer was able to express it really very effectively. I do think there's a certain irony in our reading that and taking comfort in it. Given that a few weeks ago, when we first heard about the survey and that the Reform Committee had conducted it, there were some people on this task force who were not very happy that we hadn't been informed. They felt like the survey was being sort of slipped in without any public process. They were concerned that it was simply an effort to create a survey that was a balance to ours. And it turns out that the survey was neutral enough and effective enough to get that sort of comment, and I would expect some others as well. And I think that's a lesson to us to wait before judging what the Reform Committee has done and what the results, whatever their motivation or the motivation of some of the people on the Reform Committee. I would say neither their motivations nor ours should be looked on with suspicion. I think it's much better to let both processes run and use the very valuable information that comes out of those processes in the best way that we can.
All right, thanks, Mike. Okay, I want to move us on to any other new business that folks have to share. Okay. Hey, Mel, I don't know that the agenda is out yet for or Devin, if you need to pinch hit, by the way, is out yet for Tuesday. Is there anything relative to policing that we're going to be discussing on Tuesday? I haven't seen an agenda yet.
No, there is not. But there is the budget, general budget discussion and under the warrant that will encompass the budget change.
Okay, great. So that's important. So folks should tune in for that. And we'll see where that lands on the agenda. But I think that's going to be really important. That also will give us the indication of whether or not we need to further prepare for a budget amendment at town meeting, or just simply support the budget that comes to town meeting. Thanks, Mel. Ann?
It's also scheduled to be on the advisory committee Tuesday night, or do we know when that might be, so that people who are tuning in can kind of...
Yeah, that's always tough, right? Mike, can you tell us?
Well, the meeting is going to start at 7. We don't have much on our agenda, so I would think it would be fairly early in the process. And I honestly don't expect a long discussion. Sometime around 8 o'clock, something on that sort.
Mike, are we starting early again at 7 or 7:30 usual time?
We'll be starting at 7:30. There's just 2 items on the agenda.
Well, Mike, maybe if you and Mel can coordinate so that either,
Right, I mean,
either
we
we're
will be
informed by the
typically, yeah.
advisory committee or select board's
Right.
informed by it, or the other
So
reverse.
I think the select board usually, shall we say, the timing on this, well, actually, the timing on either one of our agendas is aspirational rather than it.
Sure.
And so it's perhaps a little more aspirational on the select board side, but because there are just more items on the agenda. But I would think we can set this for like 8 or 8:15 with some reasonable level of certainty that within plus or minus 10 minutes it'll be there.
Great. Okay, very helpful.
Yeah.
And thanks for bringing that up.
I will say that this is going to be presented as a petition, and Bonnie, if I send you a text message when we're getting to it, if you can then join the advisory committee meeting, that would be very, very helpful.
Yes, I can do that.
Me too, if you don't mind.
Yes, and also, is that going to require a presentation from us?
Not really. Honestly, I think this should be a very straightforward, very straightforward, short process with advisory.
Okay.
But I have been surprised in the past.
I'm going to prepare for that surprise.
Yes.
I've been through AC before.
Yes, you have. Although this is a very different and much more, how shall I say, much more sophisticated approach to getting the funding and getting this thing going.
We'll just say palatable. How about that?
Well, sophisticated, palatable, whatever adjective you want to use is okay with me.
So I'd say Brookline forward, something else, whatever you want to call it.
Brookline incrementalism. Brookline status
say
quo with a
because-
little change.
So as Lloyd is still here. Lloyd's department is a perfect example of starting with one person and a relatively tight budget, and certainly he hasn't got vast amounts of money now, but there's a staff. The budget is expanded year by year, and the scope of what it does is expanded year by year. That's what happens.
That's what we're
you
doing.
Don't snap your fingers and make a huge change in the structure of things. That's what Mel was saying. And in fact, it takes a little while to get things in place. So this is the start of getting something in place that I think we'll all be very pleased to see a few years from now, but that's how long it's going to take to get it fully in place.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that we're all on the same page with what needs to be done right now to move forward on this, and
Exactly.
I'm glad to hear your optimism. We'll all remain cautiously optimistic about Tuesday night, but ready to talk about why this is so important, and I feel like Bonnie and Ann are in a great position to do that, and so is Mike. And I'll do my part on the select board. And I think Mel's got some really good ideas about how to make this position work in tandem with the consultancies that we've talked about to really get the best out of our dollars. So I think we're in a good place. Good. All right, so we'll leave it there. Chi-Chi, go ahead.
I just want to quickly add one point. I think I remembered what I wanted to add. I'm going to put a link in the chat to an article in the New York Times about how a lot of incidents of anti-Asian incidents are actually tied to mental illness. That it's folks who have mental illness issues, and I think that what we're doing in terms of providing more social services ultimately gets at the root of some of this in a much better way than just a pure law enforcement response. So I think that ties a lot of these threads together. And that's all.
Thank you, Chi-Chi. Unless someone else does, I don't see a need for us to meet next week. And Mike, you do?
No, yes, that's
great. Yes, okay. I thought I saw this.
No. No fingers are raised.
Yeah, I know that that many of our members are going to be involved either as members of town meeting or interested parties in town meeting, and that's going to take some significant time over the next couple weeks. Town meeting begins on Wednesday, May 19th, my birthday. So no better place to spend it than on a 3.5 or 4 hour Zoom call with you all people. Very excited about that. And then goes on to the 20th. So it'll be the 19th and the 20th, and then follows up the next week with the 25th, potentially the 27th. I think it used to be sometimes town meeting could get done in 2 to 3 days. More recently, it's been more like 4 to 5 or 6 days, but let's see what we can do, folks. Let's town meeting, let's get on the same page, or at least, minimize the debate on some of these issues, especially if points have already been made, and get to voting on these things. So 19th, 20th, 25th, and 27th are currently scheduled dates for town meeting for anybody that's interested in those. Like I said, the select board is having its meeting. It's what we call our organizing meeting on Tuesday, May 11th. Very cool part of that is Mel begins presiding over that meeting, as we then elect a chair and potentially vice chair. That was a new thing that happened last year. That was a position created without any discussion or public process, but here we are. We have a vice chair position now. So maybe that's going to happen as well. We'll see who ends up presiding over the remainder of the meeting on the 11th, and what impacts that has for the work of the board going forward. For those that pay close attention to our board meetings, we do traditionally also meet during town meeting sessions for usually about an hour, sometimes an hour or so if we need to, right before each town meeting night, just in case we need to, well, we have work to do sometimes too, but also just in case we need to respond to any late breaking amendments and those kinds of things. So our schedule is going to get a little bit hectic over the next couple of weeks. So we'll be pretty busy there. I will let you know if and when I think there's a need for us to meet again. As I said, it's only going to be if we need to respond to something significant that is happening, or if there is a proposal where, it feels like we need a vote of support of the task force, or at least significant discussion on an item from the task force. But we're not going to, as much as I love seeing y'all, we're not going to meet just to meet. So we'll be back in touch about when we might need to meet next, and we'll try to give you as much advance notice as possible, because I know you have other lives and things going on Friday mornings besides this. But as Ann said at the beginning, just want to thank everybody here for, that was Ann Braga, want to thank everybody here for your service and your ongoing service in this work. It's really important. It matters. You matter. And I'm glad to see our work moving forward, including through this sort of change in the budget, the hopeful creation of this new position, and the other work that's happening at the same time. So just thanks to everybody. Thanks also to our amazing staff who keep sticking with us through all of this. Appreciate y'all. All right. See you soon. Take it easy.